Nintendo is well known for releasing a steady stream of bangers and top-tier video games with the courage to continue to innovate even when it would be so much more simple to just sit back and cash in on the fruits of their labors. Today though, I want to take a look back at their very roots and the top 10 best-selling games for the Nintendo Entertainment System. At number 10 is the game Golf at just over 4 million copies. At first glance, the game looks a bit bland if you were to judge it by today's standards, but it did some things for the genre that hadn't been done before. It was the first game to ever use a power and accuracy bar to control your shot when swinging your golf club. It also featured a mustachioed Italian man in a red shirt, someone that Nintendo would later officially reveal is Mario himself. Golf was developed by only two people, Satoru Iwata, who would later become the CEO of the company, and Shigeru Miyamoto, another Nintendo juggernaut that will have his hand in just about every game on this list. Golf released on multiple consoles and was a cool little hidden Easter egg in a few different games. By far the best Easter egg appearance though was on the pre-4.0 firmware for the Nintendo Switch, which had you change the console date to July 11th, the day of Iwata's unfortunate passing, and move your Joy-Cons to imitate his signature move. Number 9 is the highly addictive game Excitebike, which pushed out a little over 4.1 million copies. Even though I've clocked an embarrassing amount of time into this game, I'm still a bit surprised to see it here. I guess I just didn't realize how popular Excitebike actually was. Excitebike was a side-scrolling motocross game that had you racing against NPC opponents with the ability to accelerate and change lanes. But beware, because if you overheat your motor or make a bad landing, it would probably cost you the race. It was an easy game to pick up and play, but a pretty tough game to master. Another game headed by the man Miyamoto himself, and almost the exact same team that would 1 year later develop Super Mario, using much of the knowledge that they gained on side-scrolling games from their time working on Excitebike. In a way, we have Excitebike to thank for the masterpiece that is Super Mario. At number 8 is Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link at almost 4.4 million copies. I've got to be honest here, probably my least favorite game on the list, and I'll admit, initially I thought that most people shared that opinion, but going by the sales and the commentary that I've seen around it, the game actually had a pretty big fan base, and I think that's great. Even if it wasn't my cup of tea, Zelda 2 did bring some staples to the series that would continue on, mainly focused around its RPG elements, allowing you to level up your magic and life. It also had a mana usage bar and better NPCs than its predecessor that wandered throughout the map. Zelda 2 opted to move away from the top-down viewpoint from the first game and became more of a side-scrolling platformer, something in the vein of like Castlevania. Coming in at number 7 is Dr. Mario, the Nintendified version of Tetris, selling over 4.8 million copies. The insane thing about this game is that it released like 4 months prior to the Super Nintendo hitting shelves and still managed to push this many copies. While I enjoyed Dr. Mario and I think it's a good game, it's basically just a Tetris clone wearing a Mario skin, with the Tetraminos replaced with medicine and viruses added onto the board that need to be destroyed. Dr. Mario was a game that was well received and reviewed, but apparently there was some pushback from parents that didn't think the medicine should be included in a game meant to be played by children. If only these parents could see what our kids are playing today. At number 6 is the very first game in the Zelda franchise, The Legend of Zelda, that sold over 6.5 million copies. It was designed by Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, side by side with Super Mario Bros., with the idea that Zelda would be a more in-depth experience and Mario more casual and linear. In The Legend of Zelda, Miyamoto really wanted the player to feel like he was going on an adventure, which is why the main character was named Link, hoping you would link yourself to him as a self-insert. The Legend of Zelda did a few things that were unique to its time. It had a mode called Second Quest, which was similar to New Game Plus, allowing you to take a run through the game a second time with harder enemies and new dungeons. Of course, if you wanted to try this mode without actually completing the game, you could start a brand new save named Zelda, and it would instantly be available for you. The Legend of Zelda was also the first game on the NES that allowed players to save their progress through the use of the battery-powered RAM on the game's cartridge. At number 5 is Super Mario 2 at over 7.4 million copies. So apparently, there is a different version of Super Mario 2 that was released only in Japan that is much like the first game but with a higher difficulty. However, the developers thought that the game would be too tough for an American audience, so they instead reskinned the game called Doki Doki Panic with a Mario aesthetic. If you're interested in playing the original Super Mario 2, it would later release labeled as Super Mario: The Lost Levels. Super Mario 2 was for sure unique from its NES counterparts, in that you actually could choose from one of 4 characters to play through the game with: Mario, Luigi, Peach, or Toad, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. This was also the first time that we could see the varying height differences between Mario and Luigi. It also introduced some important characters to the Mario franchise, like Bob-omb, Shy Guy, Birdo, and Pokey. At number 4 is Tetris, which sold 8 million copies on the NES. The crazy thing about Tetris is that over its many releases through the years, the game is one of the top-selling games of all time, if not the top-selling game, breaking over 500 million copies sold at the time of this recording. Tetris was the brainchild of a Russian man named Alexei Pajitnov, who developed the game as a way to test computing capabilities at the computing center where he worked. The game very quickly gained popularity amongst his co-workers. In fact, the game was said to have been banned during work time because it was becoming too much of a distraction for the employees. Inspiration for Tetris came from a game called Pentaminos from Alexei's childhood that had players creating pictures using different shapes. If you can get all the way to the end of Tetris and get a high enough score, you can see a rocket launch from the front of St. Basil's Cathedral, with the size of the rocket depending on your score. In 2009, a man named Harry Hong would become the first verified person ever to hit the game's top score of 999,999. Number 3 is my personal favorite NES game, and probably not a surprise. That's Super Mario Bros. 3 at a whopping 18 million copies. Super Mario is set up to be like a stage play, with the opening screen being opening curtains and all the obstacles being bolted down to the background. Because of this, they also thought it was much more important to bring characters with strong personality into the game. So we got Bowser's Children, whose personalities were supposed to be based off of 7 of the developers that worked on the game. Originally, the plan was for Super Mario Bros. 3 to be a top-down isometric game, but Miyamoto thought that would be too difficult for players to position their jumps, and so it was reverted back to a 2D platformer. To appeal to a wider range of players, the earlier worlds were made intentionally easier with a lot of extra lives, while the later worlds would ramp up in difficulty. Super Mario 3 was also the first Mario game to include an overworld to travel. Now I have a sneaking suspicion that the success of number 2 is because it actually came bundled with the top selling game, and that is Duck Hunt at 28.3 million copies. In Duck Hunt, you shoot at ducks as they fly from the brush using the NES Zapper accessory, a gun that allowed you to aim and shoot towards your CRT TV, giving players a similar experience to being in an arcade. There were 99 rounds in the game, and if a player could complete them all, they would unlock Round 0, a round where the birds would fly faster and haphazardly. Because it required a special accessory to play the game, it didn't release on that many platforms, but it would see a return on the Nintendo Wii, with Wii Remote acting as a replacement for the gun. And ladies and gentlemen, at number 1, and the game that made him a household name, is Super Mario Bros. At a ridiculous 40.2 million copies. Not only was it one of the first platformers to reach a wider audience, but it is seen as the game that saved gaming after the great gaming crash of the early 80s, and it sits on many top games lists. It was the culmination of the skills that Miyamoto and his team learned from developing Excitebike, Devil World, and Kung Fu, where they really wanted to focus on precise athletic movement, giving the player a lot of control over their avatar and large, colorful characters. Again, the game would be available bundled with a few other titles and shipped with a certain model of the NES, which probably helped boost its sales. Even today, the game sees pretty regular play and is a staple game for speedrunning. If you enjoyed the video, make sure also to check out the next one on screen to learn 5 little known facts about Pac-Man. Thanks for watching.